I'm going to say something that may be obvious, but language really matters to your writing. Now, the reason I say this and want to encourage you to really look at the way you're using language is because language is like the embodiment of our story. So we have these stories in our bodies, in our minds, in our hearts, in our souls. And when we bring them to the page, we're using language. That seems obvious. But here's the thing. Oftentimes, writers kind of skim the possibilities of the language they can use. What do I mean by that? I mean they reach for words that are everyday words, what one of my teachers would call anybody words. These are words that they think the reader wants to hear instead of words that feel like the expression of what they mean to say. This is why writing is tricky and why writing is hard, is because we're taking an experience, whether fiction, whether lived, and we're translating it into language. Language is our paint. Language is our medium. And so we want to play with and find the language that truly expresses the truth of our stories. So I'm just going to give an example of one of my stories that I worked on for a long time. I really spend a lot of time in the field of language. Are my sentence structures varied? Am I using the word that I mean to use? And sometimes I'm not, but I don't have the right word yet. That's fine. We don't do this all on a first draft. But what we can do as we're revising is look at sentences and ask ourselves, like, is this really transmitting what I want to transmit? Do these words have a kind of charm and do they embody the voice of the story? So the example I wanted to give was a simple example of a story that I wrote called On the Edge of Everything. And in that story, the protagonist's son throws sand in her eye and she can't see. But one of the things I remember about writing that story was coming upon the word in my own, I don't remember in the process of how, but the word briny, and meaning like pickle brine, that her vision became briny and blurred. And I went around the whole day after my writing session feeling so good that I had found that one word, because to me, it articulated and embodied the experience the protagonist was having of her blurred vision. So there are lots of ways to exercise your language muscles, and I really encourage you to do that. So one of them is read poetry. A lot of poets, this is the thing with us being writers, is quite often we're saying things in a familiar way. And one of our tasks is to defamiliarize the language. And what I mean by that is make it fresh, make it interesting. And that's what poets do. So read poetry, good poetry, and notice how they've defamiliarized language to make it fresh and poignant. So one of the problems with familiarization Anthony Doerr has written about this, is that readers skim, and it doesn't penetrate into the mind and body and intelligence of the reader. It's kind of like, oh, yeah, 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 I know that. But when we use words that are particular and poignant and juicy, well, then you've got your reader. You've got them where you want them.